Welcome to this episode of Network AF, and I'm proud to welcome my friend and fellow networker, Janine Malcolm. Janine, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're up to in networking.
Hi, Janine Malcolm, Salesforce Director of Network Engineering. We run big networks. So what am I doing right now in network engineering? Running a couple of groups at the moment. We have the backbone team that was kind of mushed together into an overall network engineering team. Mm-hmm. And so we also have another team that helps us run some of the M&A networks as well. Mm-hmm. Underneath me is now. So yeah, it's been a big change for me because the first couple of years it was just the backbone, mm-hmm. and now it seems to be everything else. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because in service providers, they just call the network because that's what revenue is. In enterprise, it's like there's production networking, which runs the revenue. And of course, without Salesforce, people can't find each other in business nowadays. And they can't look up who said what to who, and all the other systems fail because you have a system of record. And then there's corp or, IT, which is different kinds of networking. So you're mostly on the prod side.
We're on the prod side, yeah. And there is a business technology group, and they have an entire wonderful team that helps on that side. But no, we're just on the production side. Yeah.
Cool. So different customers, same idea, different scale maybe of the prod side.
I don't know. They have a lot of offices.
Okay. Well, it's more locations, maybe less volume.
Definitely.
Applications.
Definitely.
Cool. So what made you interested in networking? Like, where were you when you decided networking was interesting, or what sort of got you into it?
I was in college. And I didn't do so well. It wasn't that I didn't do so well. I felt like it was not very good education for my money because I was paying for it myself. Mm-hmm. And so I decided working full-time and going to school full-time was a little bit of a challenge. Mm-hmm. So I decided, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I was actually working on a farm that I had worked on as a teenager when a friend told me that they were interviewing at Digex. And I said, well, hey, I've always loved computers. My grandfather actually got me into computers really young, like 4 or 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try this out. I'm sure I can do this. And I went in as customer service person in Digex in dial-up. So, and then I moved to lease lines, so T1s, that kind of stuff, T3s, that kind of thing. And then I just kind of gradually, I was over on the web server side for a while. That was eye-opening for me.
It was new for everyone at the time,
Yeah. Especially with what web servers were mainly doing at that time.
Yes.
We'll move on. And then I went into...
And
2 years in, I was over on the network engineering side. And I really decided that, wow, this is really cool. I love this. This is basically like a big picture, and I get to move data around. And I'm learning how to at least code in Perl. Hey, look, sorry.
I still do.
I still do. I admit it. I haven't even started reforming yet. But that's how I got into it. Yeah.
No, that's cool. I mean, I remember my first day of computer science, and I don't have a degree. I left before. And I met the person that did image processing, and I said, oh, that's really interesting. And the guy that did networking, I'm like, oh, okay. And then, I was interested in, parallel distributed, found the internet, back at a good time. And I also, like you, I'd been fortunate. And when I was 8, my uncle gave me a book on BASIC, and my father was doing, did stuff. And my uncle briefly let me on the ARPANET, and I quickly found systems he didn't think I should be in. So that was my early intro. Was like, no, change password, stay away. But I have fond memories of Digex, not only because Doug's an awesome guy, and Lisa, and Ed, and Dave McGuire, and the whole crew, but because I was at Disclave, which is a science fiction convention.
Yes. Yep.
My wife and I, Gail and I, met at Worldcon in Chicago a few years before that, and I saw this flyer Sun 3 260, Unix shell access. And I was like, I could do that. I have a Sun 4 in my basement. And so we did that. I'm actually partnered with Digex a little bit. And of course, Digex, is pretty early in growing Backbone, which then
exactly.
And, it was pretty cool. And at NetAccess, at my ISP, people started often sort of in the knock. When we had a network. Before that, it was support.
Yeah.
And then it's always interesting because at the time it was like people who had bright, shiny eyes would either be like, ooh, systems, or ooh, network, or there's some people that really are passionate about support, and God love them because I've done my share of support and I love talking to customers. But it's like, they can't use Eudora because their disk is full. Can be frustrating sometimes, as you remember. But yeah, I mean, that was sort of the early career path. I guess we'll later talk about sort of how do we help people get in, because it was a pretty cool time to come in, and anyone that had the bright, shiny eyes was like, was helpful. So I guess, was going to get the opportunity. Like, what was really helpful, in Digex, sort of earlier in your career? I guess two-part question. What was really helpful, and, what was like frustrating that we could do better at, in terms of welcoming people?
Sure. So one thing that was fantastic is I've tried to do this as much as possible with everybody in all of my teams now, is that it was a big mentoring experience. Like, I literally sat with someone and I was like right over their shoulder and they were right over my shoulder. We were like working on problems and, doing stuff together. Hey, let's go do this router over here. Hey, let's go troubleshoot this problem. It was honestly fantastic that way. And it is, you can still do that even in the times of the pandemic, but I think it was amazingly helpful. One other thing that I think was wonderful is that, Digex had a lot of fantastic women. And I actually...
Doug's wife is an amazing woman.
Exactly, right? And then there was Megan, who was my mentor. So like I remember fondly. And then Tori Morton Crocus now. So like, it was really great to have so many, people to help out. It was a lot of helping each other, which was, I think, great. I still feel like that is the biggest way to go. I think you learn, what is it, like 70%, you sitting there, experience and mentoring and everything. And we still do that on all my teams. We cross-train. I think that's a fantastic thing. I actually signed up to be a mentor because I really want to help. And even though I know I'm not going to have the same technical skills as the person who I'm probably mentoring, because we do, it's like, right. Okay, like the mostly software developers, right? And I'm not, but still,
we all need to learn Python, even if we think that white space shouldn't be syntax. So
just said that the other day. That's so funny.
Well, Tickle, Fortran. I mean, it's not an illustrious line of white space of syntax, but
it's true. It's true. But yeah, no, I think that same thing is huge even now.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Well, I guess that's an interesting question because as the world gets more complex, it's like a friend of ours from IBM Cloud says, without the network, there is no cloud. Or the Zen version, which is network is the water of the clouds, the connective tissue, what clouds are made of. But, we have these amazing computers and these amazing networks and these amazing SaaS services like Salesforce. And it can be hard for someone in college or even not going to college to sort of get at what all the underneath is. And then we have this tribal knowledge. So I guess that's an interesting question. You're still trying to, at Salesforce, keep those mentorship patterns, maybe not pair programming or routing or whatever, but even with COVID and maybe the after?
I think it's important to do that. I think, even though, yes, we have all these wonderful classes and everything, and it's way better than it was. Like when I was in college, it wasn't network engineering. There was, computer science, and that was pretty much it. Like, right.
Yeah.
So
studying protocol fields of things, not dynamics of distributed networks, right?
Exactly. So it's a different thing. And I think that there are some really good programs these days. But I still think that, the good old fashioned mentoring is fantastic. And it applies to a lot of different kinds of areas, right?
So let me ask you a question about that. I will say this as someone who has destroyed the internet 1.5 times because I was associated with Vinny and AS 7007. I was the fat man in the fat man little man internet exchange, but it wasn't my thing. It was his day router. Have you ever blown up the internet, Janine?
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay. So
who hasn't taken BGP off of a router or inverted your access list or something? Yeah.
55 255 00 255. We said we weren't going to make vendor jokes, so
Sorry.
So I was actually at a social last night where he was like, "Oh, were you an ISP? Did you know the internet sometimes gets blown up?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm aware." But do you think that? I mean, a lot of this. Speaking of like old young getting into it, it feels like we all had permission to sort of explode the internet. And like now, if someone at Kentic said, "Hey, I might try this thing and it might explode the internet. It might take our service down," haha. I'd be like, "Oh, no. That's not what we do."
Yeah, I think
do you feel that was made learning easier, or?
I wish I had better labs then. Honestly, I do honestly think that labs these days are much better. I was actually in the lab at Digex for a while and helping build the lab and all of that stuff. But it wasn't like it is today. I'm able to recreate a scenario a bit better. And I do think on that front, if you're talking about big changes and that kind of thing, automation, getting people off keyboards, that's all good. I mean, you're going to have human errors. Like, that people get tired, they get exhausted. You're cramming more things in the smaller windows and that kind of stuff to make sure that things, stay up. But in order to keep things up, you got to actually change and fix them and stuff. So you're going to have human errors.
Yeah. And the goal is to have computers automate the good and not replicate the bad.
Exactly.
But I mean, people may not know this, but when Janine and I started doing networking, there were no comments on static routes. And most networks were bubblegum and static routes. And no one knew why it was there. So don't touch it because things might break. So definitely... I mean, the ability of commit, rollback, and git.
Rollback, my best friend.
Yes, I mean, the old way was reboot in 15 minutes and then make the change and then hope that you've remembered to cancel the reboot or whatever you call that. So,
yep.
No, that's cool. Were there any frustrations, any things that you think, we could be doing better, at the time? Or now to make things welcoming for people getting into it?
I think at the time, because it was really word of mouth. And I wonder how much word of mouth there is now. I really feel like there is. It's still that way, still word of mouth getting into the industry. Oh, hey, I noticed you have these skills. I bet they're applicable over here. How do we reach people, especially in network engineering? I think that the software development is much more accessible for people overall. What I've seen, I don't know if maybe this is just my anecdotal view, after going to conferences my entire career, I'm thinking maybe 15% women in the network side. Yeah. It's supposed to be I think it's 30 to 40 on the software development side, which, hey, they're doing way better. So I feel like I should work on that, help it out.
Anna Claiborne at Packet Fabric makes that, suggestion to bridge, because her point is, let's market to the software engineering, which looks more like early computer science, right? It's probably not going to get 4 times the representation as we do early in career coming out of, school, but there are definitely things that turn people of all sorts of diverse backgrounds off to, a group that's not like them. But she suggests we market, hey, if you're interested in distributed systems, the internet is the biggest, most dynamic distributed system there is. And if you want to study it, well, that's what I like doing. If you want to engineer it, the trick with automation, right, is not having 40 engineers each write a Python program of their CLI thing, but, what are the patterns, and let's, think about it and do it. So
right. One system. Not 40.
Yes. Yeah. Have you tried that recruiting tactic yet?
I have not, which I think is a fantastic idea.
Check in and see if
I have to try it. Definitely.
Have there been any other organizations that were had as many great women, and trusted and in authority, as what you experienced in Digex, later in your career?
I think Cogent also had a pretty good representation as well in the network engineering side in particular. Mm-hmm. It wasn't quite the 50-50 like we had, at Digex. It was, the network engineering team at that time was like 50-50. It was like totally it was wonderful. I think that they did have a pretty good representation. I'm working on it.
We're even further behind and working on it. And I think some of that we think about, which is maybe tougher during COVID, maybe not, is earlier stage, getting people earlier in stage, earlier in career, because there is more diversity and, maybe showing the fun, but also worry a little bit about, the tribal nature of it, which also different people do better or worse at, hey, I'm confused, can you please help me? Or, how to normalize that to make sure that, it's not just gender, it could be different cultures that people come from where, some people are better at giving feedback or getting feedback or all these things. So we will figure that all out together. Yeah. So you mentioned Cogent and Digex and Salesforce. Mm-hmm. So it's all networking, right? It's all network, but service provider and having customers that are themselves service providers. And although in some sense, we're a customer of Salesforce, we're a SaaS company. So we are a customer, but a service provider to our customers. But it is a little different. And I'm just curious what you found, is like sort of technology, culture, problems difference between working in service provider networks versus enterprise.
So I have worked at, I think it's 3 and 3 actually. So 3 enterprises. I worked at a financial institute. I worked at just a pure enterprise. And then of course, Salesforce, right? Yep. And then of course the ISP side, which I've actually had more time in, right? So it is vastly different. I find that some things are much more strict. The very small enterprise that I worked at, I did everything, spam assassin. I'm running Linux machines. I'm helping database. I'm doing firewalls. I'm everything, which was great.
All around nerd. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I loved it. And then I think at Cogent, the speed of innovation and the things that you get to do.
The efficiency. The network engineer per terabit.
It's amazing. Yeah. The efficiency there is amazing. Honestly, it's a fantastic network. I think that, it probably depends on the place. I feel like I probably don't get to do as much system stuff now as I did at Cogent. I could do more programming and systems work. Even being a manager, I could do all that stuff. And now it's a little bit harder for me to do that. Now, especially now the team's bigger, right? So I guess there's that dynamic between the two. But and I think pace is a bit different as well. Pace is definitely different.
Do you work with more different vendors and sort of types of elements in an enterprise than, in your experience as service providers, sort of more, fixed and regular?
It's fixed and regular. And especially with Cogent, when you're talking about Cogent, they know exactly what they're doing. They have a set of products and these are the products we sell, and it's very clear. I think I actually work with way more vendors right now overall, which is kind of fascinating. And I'm doing slightly different things in network engineering now. Obviously, there's some differences in the network engineering side.
Does that make testing more complex when you have more vendors and different, sort of pace of newness? Your customer is not a product manager; it's someone trying to make something, and the application is going to do and be hosted the way that people want it to. Does that make testing, or is it you have patterns that help with that?
We do have patterns that help with that, but it is more, the testing is, I would say you want to make sure that not only is the network running and everything's efficient, but that the applications are appropriately running over it. So you're working with lots of service owners within the organization. And that's kind of fascinating too. It's kind of cool. It's like they're our customers, and we get to work with them. Hey, this is my customer. How is your application running? What do you need? That kind of stuff. There's that kind of relationship, which I think is fascinating and kind of fun.
Cool. Yeah, I guess at another time we can get into how do all the groups, and we didn't talk about security, like get infrastructure, applications, and all that. That's sort of my day job, thing, and trying to figure that out. And a lot of cultural divide there too. I mean, as much as service provider and enterprise networking and prod and corp networking can be, different applications, different, people we deal with, different vendors. Going across groups can be a lot, but at Salesforce, do you work with cloud as well as more traditional, I'll call it on-prem, routers and switches and things like that? Is that
we're starting to on that front? Yeah, absolutely. But
is that interesting, difficult from architecture, provisioning, training? It's network principles underneath, but it isn't exactly the same, right?
No, it's we are embarking upon this process of making sure everybody is educated in how the different providers provide the services, and they're vastly different between the different, cloud provider vendors, right? So you have to make sure that, okay, well, you understand how this one works and you understand traffic flows and how this one works. And okay, this one provides this and this one provides that, and, trying to get everybody on the level set. So there is a challenge always of making sure everybody is taking classes, getting to do all the different types of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for us too at Kentic. Again, we know what tunnels are. Right. And we know what prefixes are, and we know what filters are, and we know what all the basic primitives are if you've been paying attention to networking. But just the infrastructure is code wave and what people want to do there. And then in cloud, it's basically you're living in someone else's virtual software land that can be hard to do the debugging in. And the training is interesting. We're trying to do content, internally and externally to help do that mapping, as a lot of people are trying to do that. Do you have people that are like deep experts in the ins and outs of Cloud 1 or Cloud 2? Or do you mentioned cross-training, like have people be sort of enough peripherally aware that they can be a consumer and then have like domain experts?
So yes, we have some people that are deeply involved in them. We also have just a series of wonderful classes that a team has developed to make sure that anybody who wants to can learn how each one is done. And it's actually self-paced. So the engineer can do that. And then sometimes there's a project that comes up and we're like, hey, everybody, would you like to take this opportunity to go work on this new thing? So we try to make space for people to be able to do that as well.
In networking, there's a lot of vendors, a lot of marketing, a lot of buzzwords. Like, are there trends and buzzwords that you're tired of hearing of? And are there things that you think this counter is like really fascinated by and think are really cool evolutions of technology that are really fun or you think are really promising? Like what's hot and what's hype?
Okay, hype. Software defined. Okay, I'm really sick of it.
SD star.
Yes, software defined anything. It's all software defined as far as I'm concerned.
The router doesn't have marbles inside.
Right, exactly. So that whole thing, I was like, okay.
Okay.
Delivery of information is certainly interesting to me. Trying to figure out how to better understand the user experience always fascinates me. because we don't want to. We're very careful about making sure we never give any customer information away, but we also are cognizant that we want to make sure the customer's experience is as good as possible. So that place, that trying to find like what is going on with the customer, that's huge for me. And then the things that are underlying that, I know this is going to sound awful. You're like, oh my God, KMZs. You're like, oh, you're kidding me, right? So
yeah,
we take an enormous amount of time looking at every single path that we're using on the network, right? And we're spending so much time doing this. And then what's going to happen is that they're going to groom you out of that path as soon as they can. You're on the path. And you don't know that the path.
The laws of physics. How does it go 35 milliseconds between LA and San Diego? Yes.
Right. We spend all this time doing this stuff and we're still doing the same things that we were, like the last decade or two.
Oh, wow.
So, I think that for me, that trying to make the user experience is as amazing as possible, looking at all that data, how do I make it easier for my engineers to make it better for everybody? I know that's probably not the biggest hype, but hey, it's where I'm at right now.
It's part of my frustration because, at Akamai, we had the data. When I ran a Usenet company, I would look at kernel TCP statistics and what AS it was going to and look at peering performance. But yeah, I mean, routers and switches, unless you're doing, that's an advantage actually of IT networking, has some of those devices like a Silver Peak load balancer or some things like that can look at performance and they're sort of network layer. But, routers and switches, NetFlow and SFlow, I mean, I've asked some of the vendors, could you flow hash so we could look at TCP session tracking? Let's ignore Quick for a second. But yeah, I mean, the RUM data you would think would be really helpful for network people, but it has user data in it. So how do you get that between layers and combine it? And how do router vendors do this? And so what we're left with, ping and trace route. If we're just saying, it was how do we have trillions of endpoints? Who can we partner with for that now that we're doing, performance testing? But it sort of still feels like if our computers know what the performance is, why are we doing synthetic testing? And it's it's an augment, right? Sometimes you need that, right? Having a problem to foo in bar, can Baz or Jill do better? You need to test that. But for a lot of it, it does seem like we could do better. But
yeah.
And it's cross stack, right? App, server infra. So
you're all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, we're hoping more people will do BPF on the server, which I can take that with BGP and see performance from TCP stats. But now it's at Kentic, we're working with New Relic because, that helps a network team go to an app person and say, oh, you have the agent. Could you please do this? But it's all Sorry?
You go to my customers and say, could you help me out?
Exactly. Could you help me help you? Help me help you. Show me their performance. We'll see. What I learned was overly advanced. If you're ahead of the market of what people do or what people are familiar with, then people, can't explain it to other people.
Yeah.
And instead, ping and trace route people can explain, and we can make that really easy, and we can make it dynamic based on your traffic. So that's the focus. But I think most network people are like that.
Yep.
And of course, it's always blame the network. The network is the problem.
Oh, it always is.
I'm sure not at Salesforce, but just in general, it's part of that. Automation. You mentioned lab. So I guess, how do you lab stuff, and can you do that across all the infrastructure, or, how do you do safe networking?
We're getting into a little fuzzy area. I can give you generalizations. So we have different types of networks, and we have kind of mini versions of them in the lab, and then we use all kinds of different tools to make sure that when we are, code certification, making sure all of that stuff works properly. My team is now responsible for that as well. So been doing a lot of that. Because good times. Making sure that when we make changes, we first check in there. What does it look like when you make the change? What are the commands that you can use? Making sure that everything in the run list when we do it is fine. We have kind of like they're kind of like R&D environments that we can then canary. We have DR environments where we can canary for certain types of networks. And then we always canary and stagger and that kind of thing. So we try to use the best possible methodology for putting anything anywhere.
So to break it down for people who might be coming up to the outsider, I'm going to guess. So by canary, you mean like a percentage of the traffic goes through some new infrastructure, or?
So if, like, for instance, you're making a change to, you say you have to add a new route policy to the network, right? You take that route policy, you put it on one of the two routers in a location. So first you would put it in R&D, then you would put 1 and 2 routers at a location, verify everything's okay, put it on the second router, still verify everything's okay. Then you start doing regional canaries, right? So you put it on one router pair in one region, one router pair in another region. Okay, then you can then kind of go out from there. So it's like every single step of the way, you are being as careful as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we did that at Akamai, and at Kentic we have an hour prem, so we actually copy a bunch of customers worth of traffic to a separate cluster, but we don't have real users on it. Ultimately, when we actually say, okay, the code is good, then we do the same thing. We'll pick a cluster and then a machine. And I'm not sure we do that for the networking. So I'll have to go follow up with our ops team. I think we might just explore the two things. But it's all Juniper and vendor, and it's all rollback and it's like on box and stuff like that. But and automated. But that's cool. I always imagine, like, I have a friend Igor who is a master at vendor torture. I long to be as good at vendor torture, but I always imagine like the Sandroid, truck from Star Wars with the droids upside down with the hot pokers, like, does this code work? Does this code work? How do you do that? People that I think are for it, even though we try to automate it. What features do we need, and will it work?
Yeah, and every in different environments, require different features, and you have to make sure that all the different pieces are tested on every single different kind of platform that you've got. And yes, we are constantly making sure we're checking for vulnerabilities, we're checking for bugs. When I go to, okay, what's your latest code you want me to try? Okay, well then we do the bug scrub, and you're like, we try to be as nice about it as possible, though. I'm not really into being mean about it.
Okay, so no vendor torture. I like that bug scrub. Is that an industry term that I haven't heard?
Yeah, we basically go and say, okay, so you want to put this on this code. What bugs are there in the code? And then we compare it to what the feature set on the network and see which ones match up. Okay, we're going to hit this bug. We want to wait for a different version of code. And of course, you sometimes catch bugs on your own, and we haven't. In the lab, it happens. You're like, oh look, or we catch it, and we have caught things in what we call the canary. The first step, the very first thing, you're like, oh look, and then we will retroactively put it back in the lab, and so yeah.
That's funny. In the Wild West days, when I'd be in a city and it's like, oh, could you help me do dynamic routing for my static network? And they're like, what IGP should I use? I'm like, well, what cards do you need? What vendors do you have? Let's look at the release notes. So it's called a bug scrub. It's like, you put that FIDI card in, then Sparks spit out the hissy port if you have this protocol enabled. It's like, But, literally there was a point at which I was like, OSPF, even RIP v2, God help you, ISIS, like just IBGP, pick the thing that has the fewest bugs for your platform. But the flip side is that was without testing and deploy, and that was clickety. So as you said, the human errors can go. Yeah, and we've seen some move towards pushing vendors to have like fewer trains, and it's tough as a vendor because you might have an older, basically program loader that was before page memory management units and preemptive multitasking and all that. And then you have the newer OS, but not everything. So it's tough.
It is hard. I know.
And
I have some sympathy.
Yes, I know. So I would not, when occasionally I go on my streaming telemetry rant about how it'd be nice if like the thing that was the OID and the show int and the API and the CLI and the streaming telemetry all had the same semantics. But that's often not the case. And so that's okay, because then people pay us to fix that problem. But it's still, someone at the end has to say like, what did some intern do to this thing? But I think some of that is us as networkers maybe ask more for features than we do, not like you and me, obviously, or our peers, but some companies wind up like, hey, I need this feature, and it's enterprise and service provider, and not like it must work. So
yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, it was fun. So we talked a little bit about your, early career. Are you hiring at Salesforce?
There are different groups that are hiring, absolutely, especially in our global network operations team. So yes, absolutely.
So when people are looking for a job in networking, like what are the things that you look for? How can someone show their interest and and sort of break into it? I mean, it was a very different time when we broke into it. Like, what would your advice be to people trying to get into networking?
Okay, so I personally, yes, it's great to know every last routing protocol on the planet. What I am more interested in personally, can you learn? Are you can you go and prove to me that you can go and actually learn something about one thing and apply that to a couple of different other, say, I have a love of BGP. I have then gone and decided that I want to go learn about how BGP route reflection is used and how it is used across these huge, large networks. What are they doing? How are they doing it? Where are they setting up their route reflection? Are they using servers? Are they not using servers? Like, whatever it is. Pick a thing, learn about it. I want to understand that you know it and that you can apply it to something else. I don't care that you have like every single little detail of knowledge of everything. Can you troubleshoot? Can you learn? That kind of stuff. I'm not as, you don't have to like tell me every last aspect of every, vendor on the planet and what they support in every version of code for every line card. And I don't care.
So is there like an equivalent for developers, where they do things on GitHub to show that they're like active and interested? I guess network people can be GitHub too now with, automation.
We do.
Exactly.
Oh, please don't test me on Git, please.
Commit, clone, pull, yeah.
Or hacker, what is it? Hacker rank, that one? Is that the one that they're using? Yeah, that one.
Is A1, yeah, that does the,
yeah.
I still know like Perforce and SCCS and stuff like that. So from before the great Gitning, unveiled upon the place. Is that, also something like that you look for people that already have had some, at least scripting, level coding?
Yeah, I mean, we do frequently ask that, if you've had even Perl or Shell or Python, at least that you're interested in learning these things. That's important because, we use it and even, in self-defense and, for making things quicker for yourself, it's helpful.
Right. As long as you configure it so it's quicker to do good things, not quicker to break things. But,
yes. But even for myself on my machine, like there are times where I just write something really quick to like do a thing for me so that I don't have to like do it by hand.
Yeah, on the more sysadmin side, I ran, a Usenet company for 10 years and as a hobby. And I would sometimes find that I had written the same Perl script 5 times, which is why I'm not a software engineer. I'm more like I write running specification. It's like, hey, I could do this. And it's like, okay, now please, people that I've hired to do great work, make it.
That is honestly precisely what I did many times in my career. Just I've got everything. I know what it has to do. This is all the data that you need in and out, and please make it so that it's not horrible.
Code
Thanks.
is more precise than English, so even if it's not good code. And hopefully we write Perl code that looks like C, not like awk, but it's possible to do evil with even acceptable things. So I guess this is a strange question because I don't have a degree, but is a degree important? Are there things that people can do if they don't have a degree to show interest or education or awareness?
Sure. So I don't feel like degrees are particularly important because I didn't ever finish either. Neither did my husband. So we seem to be doing just fine. There are ways that you can do this. There are different vendors who have their own testing and that kind of thing. And, I absolutely, those are helpful. Unfortunately, sometimes those are just pure memorization. And I do worry about that. We did have some successful mini labs set up at one company. And they, went through some troubleshooting steps. And that's actually really helpful. You can kind of do like a lab where you like shut down a port and you see like how the person reacts to like, oh, hey, your routes for this went away. And, what did they notice? Did they look in the syslog? Did they like that kind of stuff? So I think those are really excellent methods. We've had, obviously there's, tech screenings and you go through like some questions. How did they answer? What were their answers? Some things where they get the concept and miss some of the details, I'm more okay with personally. The concept is...
How does someone learn? And, it's like you almost want to make sure that people are comfortable getting confused and owning the unconfusion versus, sort of training in a class, but you have to provide the resources.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Like I feel like getting confused is excellent. I'm confused all the time. And I feel like it's a good, I have to ask, I don't have perfect knowledge of everything happening. Some people, I have to ask questions all the time. And I think that very thing actually within teams is helpful. I'm not going to know like all 40 or 50 projects that are going on right now.
Right.
That's okay.
Any vendors, but I like to say networking is a lot of simple little things that interact in complex ways, and then there's vendor bugs. So you're unlikely to find a kernel bug maybe in your career, but it depends how low level. You always have to say, well, wait, is this a bug? So you have to run through, like, is everything doing what it should be? Do I understand what it should be doing? So it's
I also think that a lot of the vendors have really good virtual routers and stuff. Right now, you can set up your own like little mini network.
VMX, VSRX.
There's
Vista has online, and now there is.
Yeah.
So we study in the physics of computer stuff. There's Bohr bugs, which always are the same, and there's Heisenbugs, which move around, and Heisenbugs move around when they're in debuggers, right? Because the stack is different. But I've seen a couple cases where the software, not running on the router, but running, or the switch, but running in a VM, has different bugs. That could be fun.
Oh, no. And of course, you can't actually do everything that you might want to test.
Right. You can't do terabit scale forwarding. And
And even just some of the features don't work because of the way things line up. So for instance, certain lag features don't really work properly. Yeah.
Cool.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing so much. Networking can sometimes frustrate us, but I think it's fun to see all the packets go and all that. I guess last question, any advice you would give yourself going back, navigating, for a career or otherwise?
Yes. As a woman in the industry, it has sometimes been a bit challenging dealing with a lot of forceful personalities. It's okay to be a forceful personality. It's okay to meet that where it's at. I think that sometimes it is a challenge because you kind of feel like you're being attacked. And I think that it's okay to be that forceful personality and not just, kind of like shrink in yourself, which is, I think, a challenge for everybody.
I mean, I've seen people do things, men do things that really are not respectful, and you try to fix and help if you can. And then I have seen separately in networking people that get so passionate about the geek binary-itis of the one way to do it.
Somebody on the internet is wrong.
Yes, exactly. And to use that. But it's not that I hate you, it's that I hate the idea and I will now prove to you that it is wrong. Is that, or I guess, so it can be hard. And I guess we owe it to, whoever it is, women or just people in
anybody
try to help. Yeah. Do that. But I guess related, I said that was the last question. So that was the second to last question. Last question. What can we do to help people from different backgrounds of all sorts to make networking, people-wise, more acceptable, given there are people on all ends of all spectrums, in it, but they get very passionate and, whatever. What advice would you have for your org, my org, people in general, trying to bring people in and then set them up for success, to have career, not just I tell you to do these things and you do a job.
Yeah, no, I think that one thing I try to do with my teams, and I hope that I'm successful in this, is that we talk about all kinds of aspects of the job. Like we try to bring out like, okay, what's going on here? What are the blockers? What can we do? I saw that your face you seem to be upset about this. Or do you feel comfortable talking about it in the team? Okay, I have this project. I have a really strong opinion on this, what should happen. But I don't actually say my opinion generally until everybody else has gotten their opinion out. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to like stifle the conversation that's happening. But we all do try to keep it as respectful as possible. And I have also coached some people that sometimes you need to just not push people because they're not comfortable. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of balance everybody out. Everybody's got a different place they're coming from. So you just have to try to keep the information flowing, get everybody talking. I hope that it's more like a family environment in my teams. That's what I try to aim for. Yeah,
it sounds very cool. It is difficult. I mean, even for me, for people that have opinions, because we're technologists or organizational, not psychologists, but we have opinions about things to like in theory, I want to say, if you need an opinion, I have one, but I will only, I will tell you, but I'm only trying to correct if it's like really wrong. It can be tough. And then
No. And that's exactly one thing I try to do on some particular things, right? Where I'm like, okay, I have a strong feeling on this one, like, especially with routing things. I'm like, okay, just gonna hold back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or SD, it's like...
Well, that one too.
Ultimately, the most successful SD thing out there is probably NSX, which started as, I hate network people, so we're going to build tunnels because we don't want to put in a ticket to get a VLAN. And so, in some sense, I think it's okay to, plus Google got everyone spun up on it. But Google's a software company. So, it's like, if you want to write software, then, SD is going to look pretty good. But anyway, well, cool. How can people find you? Do you have a blog, Twitter, not Facebook, that's private.
The funny thing is I don't actually, I'm so terrible at this. I'm so bad at this. LinkedIn is probably a good one. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best one. I don't really have everything's personal. I don't talk about work.
That's okay. Gail my wife is not on Facebook. So her high school classmates are like, they send me something on Facebook if I should send it to her. She just refuses to buy in to the ecosystem. But
that's funny. So my husband, Joe, is, as I think you probably know, I'm very similar on that front. So I'm the person who does everything.
Okay. No, that's fine. But anyway, thank you for being the second guest on Network AF and helping me evolve this, and we welcome all into networking and hope this was helpful.
This is great. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.